Hey everyone, and welcome back to a very existential episode of iPrint 3D. This week we're talking about the principles of shapes. And I have done a little research on this and I've kind of figured out that there are really only four main shapes: circles, yeah, squares, triangular shapes, and pentagon. No, not that pentagon. There we go. Pentagons. Now, the reason I kind of stick with that is because as I've worked through a couple of files, I've realized that those shapes will repeat themselves. And you'll see what I mean. So here we're looking at a base, and this is a circle. And even when we look at it from its silhouette or shadow, it's still an oval, which is a circular shape. The supports make a cylinder, which technically is also circular. And everything still follows that circular pattern. And so we can see how the principle of a circular shape and keeping circular supports will make our bases work. But how does that affect other objects? Things that aren't so obvious. An arm, a little character, maybe a gun. Well, we can look at the support lines at the bottom to kind of give us an idea. Grogu there on the left is obviously a pentagon, but it's only because of his ears. For the most part, he's actually mostly a circle, almost a square, until he gets to about the top of his head, and the ears cause him to become kind of a pentagonal shape. The gun and the arms are mostly cylindrical, with a few exceptions of the gun being some square points or rectangular points in the middle and at the bottom. But supporting those as a circular object or a cylindrical object would be appropriate. Grogu, on the other hand, would need a different approach, as he's pentagonally designed. You would need to support him evenly from the bottom. Again, following the curve of his base shape, or whatever the bottom of his object looks like. And making sure to trace a line of supports that will cover as close to pretty much that line all the way around. This will ensure the shape itself prints properly. Now, whatever other supports you add around that, bracings, etc., is only going to strengthen that ability to do that. So keep that in mind. It's not the only thing you need to do, but you definitely need to make sure that the shape is what the support shape, the general idea, is following. Now, how about something like this? This is an interesting one. Now, from first glance, you're thinking that doesn't follow any particular shape, but it does. It's a half circle, and technically it follows an arch, so it still falls under the circular kind of family of shapes. This one's a little bit more complicated because it's got so many little bits hanging off of it, and on top of that, this one also has the most islands I think I've ever seen on an object. Because of the texture they chose, this has an interesting issue with islands. But we won't get too heavy into that right now. I'm essentially just going to tell you it's a circle. You're going to want to trace that shape up that arch to make sure that it prints right. Now, this is a good example of a square. Also has two circles on it and a couple rectangles. And if we turn it to the side, we're going to see some V shapes in that handle. And those are technically triangles. So yes, I know I'm pointing out the design aesthetics and how they were made with different shapes. However, you can break these objects down into those basic shapes when you're thinking about how to support them. The wheels are circles, so you want to support the rim of the wheel if it's being printed in such an angle that it needs that. The square, you want to make sure you support the edge of the square or the rectangle. I think generally, aside from whatever shape it is, you want to make sure that you support its edge first. And I think that's the most important takeaway that I've gotten out of my research doing shape design and shape-based principle printing. Sorry, that's a tongue twister, I guess. And what I've found is that it doesn't necessarily matter what shape you're using. You can generally walk away from this concept being able to support anything and everything that anyone throws at you. And take away one thing from this: always support the edge of the object. And this really all depends on your orientation. So, for example, this cart is leaning towards one wheel and one corner. That is going to be where you start. However, you want to make sure that the box, the framing of whatever the object is completely supported. And this is something I've learned thoroughly over practice, but it's been talked about so much lately, and I've had so many people ask me on different forums and areas where I chat with folks and help them with printing problems, where the issue has been that base layer or that base shape has not been drawn out. The supports aren't creating it. And so therefore you have a supporting system that's not adequate to what you're trying to support. You know, you don't want a circular shape of supports on the bottom of a square. You want a square, because that's going to give you the best coverage for that particular shape. And this next one seems a little difficult too. And again, I keep picking ones that are going to have a not so obvious shape. It's actually a couple different shapes. If we look at him from the bottom and we take a look at what his shape is, he's actually kind of a triangle. But as he goes up, he becomes a little thicker, a little bulkier, and he will start to become more of a square, almost there, and then kind of a pentagonal shape as he comes towards the middle, where he gets really big. Does this mean you have to support each level of that, kind of going up? No, because he's going to be supported from the bottom up. Because he's going to be solid, and because of the way we're going to wind up supporting him, I don't think he's going to need that extra level. So what you really want to do is you want to make sure that your bottom layer, where his feet, his tail, and all those things are very tightly packed supports. And don't worry about removing them, because this is going to be on his very bottom that no one's going to see. Yeah, you want to pack them in nice and tight. Paint them on if you want. Click, do them manually. Set your interval real tight, like a 0.9 or a 1 millimeter if you're going to do the painting. So it'll let you kind of paint a little closer. And then once you've got that satisfied on the bottom, you can move on to kind of look at his islands, because obviously he's got some islands up there. He's a heavily detailed figure, and he's got some spots where, for sure, are going to be floating out in the middle of nowhere. And, we can add a couple support sticks here and there just to kind of prepare for that. But the only way we're really going to find this out is by island searching. And we'll go ahead and do that. And we'll do that at the 20 micron level just to see where our islands are. And I'm going to go ahead and cut that out with editing so you guys don't have to sit and wait for the stupid loading bar. I do, however, so we're going to go ahead and do that. We'll check all the islands, and then as usual, we'll do the manual checks as we always do, which I'm kind of doing, now here, just kind of going up and down, just seeing where we're at. And then once we do the island checks, we'll have a better idea of where that's going to be. But again, this is just a really interesting example because he's such an interesting shape, or at least he appears to be. But when you break it down to his base, the way he starts, he's a triangle. So you can support him with a triangular shape of supports, and as long as they're done thick enough and thorough enough on the bottom layer, in that bottom area, and you got some good adhesion there, you're not going to need to worry about that at all going up. So he should be good. So anyway, we'll check the islands out. We'll come right back and we'll see what we've got. 460 some islands, I think. Some of which I just did some treeing on, and others I did some mini supports and some various things that we've shown you guys in other videos. But essentially, I feel at this point he is pretty adequately supported. His islands are handled, and he is oriented and supported well enough on the bottom. His build-up is going to be good. So I think he is about ready to go. So from this stage, I mean, obviously, we're going to go ahead and slice him. But if you wanted to do any refinements, now would be the time to go back and, go, okay, maybe I should add a couple more supports here, or I can do a couple more supports here. You can run a simulation at this point. You can run this through UV tools if you want to be more thorough about the island searching. You can go layer by layer like we like to, using the layer slider. Those are all great ways to check your work and to make sure that you have not overlooked anything or you have not left anything out when it comes to the overall supporting. And you'll pretty much know if you did a good job. It's going to look like a really clustered field of light supports underneath the model. And then on the outer edge, that's going to get real thin. And then you're going to see that, when this prints, not only is it going to be super easy to pop off of these supports, but you're not going to have to worry about any damage whatsoever. It's going to be really good, really easy to remove, and very amazing. You'll be very happy with those results. Even if you're not printing this guy specifically, I think this technique can be used on minis in general. Again, like I said, a lot of figurines tend to be round. Arms tend to be cylinders or circles. Bodies usually tend to go into the square category, whereas they usually have four sides. Things like that. So as you start to recognize the different shapes that kind of appear in the characters, and yeah, sure, maybe having a bit more of an idea of how the art was actually created and how art is actually made and the shapes behind artwork and things like that might actually help you. So in general, studying art or studying anatomy might actually give you a better idea. But I don't want to overcomplicate things and say, go get an anatomy book and study the different shapes that make up the body. I don't think that's necessary. But to say that the shapes that make up the body are definitely one of the things you need to think about. Arms and legs are cylinders, which fall into the circle category. Like I said, head, body, torso, the trunk, square. So that all falls into the square category. Bases usually fall into the circular category. And then you have your other items that kind of fall into various, different areas, such as triangles. And then the pentagonal shapes, which can rear their head in many, many different places, depending on the shape of the character and its orientation. The pentagon thing is not as obvious when you look at it from the three-dimensional standpoint. You have to kind of look at it from a two-dimensional standpoint on the slice and go, yeah, that's a pentagon shape. That's a five-sided shape, or it's very close to an evenly five-sided shape. And the reason, again, why this is important is because bracing the outside of that shape is going to ensure that whatever shape it was meant to be is going to be the shape that it's going to look like because you supported it that way. So I think the real principle of shape is that making sure that your supports are in the shape of the actual basic shape of whatever you're printing. I think if you follow that general rule, I think that the principles will help you. And I think it also makes it easier when we think about how to tackle a support job. We can look at it and go, okay, these are square, these are circular, this is cylindrical. All right, so I know how to go at this. Done. Of course, the details will always make a difference, but that is generally the rule of how these things work. Anyway, folks, that is pretty much it. I hope that this actually opened up some eyes and rang some bells for some people, maybe turned on some lights. And if not, well, we did try. Anyway, hope y'all enjoyed this episode. Thanks again so much as usual for watching. We do appreciate it. Again, if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to drop us a like and ring that bell if you want notifications about episodes like this one. See you all soon.